Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, welcome back. Thank you everyone for joining us for part 4 of our multi-age combined class science planning and assessment and thinking and doing and learning. This session is called Streamlining Assessment in those combined classes, and we hope to offer you some tools and strategies that you will find useful today. As in our other sessions, we would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We are both coming to you today from Treaty 7 in traditional Blackfoot territory, looking again at this incredible drone footage. It just sucks me in every time and makes me want to go outside and reminds me of the value and the importance of finding time every day to be connected to the land and to use the land and those who have cared for it for time immemorial before I became a settler here to really help students to also cultivate and protect the land as an important part of their own lives as well. So I'm grateful to the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai nations, to the Ithaca Stony Nakota Nation, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. I'm grateful to the Tsuut'ina Nation and also to the Otipemisiwak Métis government within the Métis Nation, Alberta District 6. Also grateful for my partners on this project, Adelie and Jess. We've put lots of hours into thinking and talking through all of these things, and we really hope that you'll find some value. Any feedback that you ever want to share with us, please reach out. Our email addresses are there. We would appreciate knowing if there's been any value to this resource and what more you might need, because we can collaborate and work together. So please reach out. All right. Adelie, do you ever find that there seems to be an overwhelming feeling sometimes of the number of things that we want to try to include in a school day or in a term? There's so many avenues and ways that you can take the learning, and there's lots of needs. Sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming. Would you agree?
It can, and in a multi-age classroom, it can feel even more overwhelming because you're thinking about how do we attend to all of these learning outcomes, and how do we support all of the different learners that we have in our classroom. And it's been fun to think through some ways that perhaps we can help folks streamline and think differently about how they're going to support learning outcomes in that classroom.
You're right. We have to be efficient, don't we? For our own sake, for the sake of also for students to see the world as connected and to see, it's just because it's 10 o'clock doesn't mean you have to stop thinking about one thing and change gears and completely think about something different. But it's important for us to see the connections between them. So let's talk a little bit about a strategy that we call clustering cusps. Now, if you happen to be a grade 7 to 12 teacher, CUSPS is an acronym that is being used in the new architecture of the curriculum. The knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures are each part of the organizing idea and are used to determine how a student uh, will achieve the learning outcome. And so we've been able to collaborate with Alberta Education to try to provide some resources to teachers. And so I've borrowed this slide from Alberta Education in some of the work that we've done together, combining cusps from multiple learning outcomes. So it's not that you just have to do one thing at a time. And I hope you'll notice that on these two different learning outcomes, the highlighting, there's light blue on this side and there's dark blue on the right-hand side. And this diagram was created by Alberta Ed, and it reminds us that we don't have to try and do it all together, or nor do we just go down one column. Like, we don't just go down the skills and procedures column and plan a lesson for this skill and procedure and plan a lesson for this skill and procedure. That they're really meant to work together, and they're meant to be interchanged in a sense that you can still, as a professional, as a teacher, you can craft and cluster and group things that make sense to create possible learning and assessment experiences. Should we take a look at an example of how you might do this? So here's what we've done is we've taken a learning outcome from grade 1 science and grade 2 science. So just to show how a multi-grade design plan could work. We went into the same organizing ideas. So both of these are taken from Earth systems. And in the green, I've got my fingers moving all over it,
I love
sorry.
it.
In the green, you can see the learning outcome. So in grade 1, students analyze the environment and explain how its elements interact and change. Grade 2, students investigate Earth, its landforms, its bodies of water, and its relationship to the sun. Then when you go into the cusps underneath both of those learning outcomes, and I selected these ones from, there's more cusps that belong under each of these learning outcomes. So it would be, if you created something that pulled these two together, it might be a learning experience or an assessment task, but it wouldn't be the only one. You know, you would add different things throughout the course of your unit, your inquiry that would add to this, and it would help inform your understanding of where students are and how, to what degree they've achieved the learner outcome. So here I thought, well, let's take a look at the land. Let's look at that beautiful drone footage that we talked about and pull those things together. And we're looking at seasonal changes in the appearance of the environment in grade 1, and then specific landform work, distinction, characteristics, the surface of various landforms in grade 2. When we think about, okay, now what are we going to do with this? We can go to that next slide then.
Just as you're talking, Cheryl, one of the
Oh
things
yeah.
that I'm thinking about is situating our kids. Like often students feel like what they're working on doesn't have authentic meaning and they can't see the why. The beautiful part about a multi-age classroom is that they can actually see how they're learning, what they're learning leads into the next conversation, leads into the next conversation. And
Mhm.
for folks who are learning, they're placing, oh, that's where we came from. And that connectedness that you talk about, I think can happen naturally as these conversations are going, which gives students more agency, I think, and understanding about why they're learning things.
Mhm. Right, beautiful. And to make those learning intentions, those targets we've talked about in other sessions, visible to students to say, and this is the progression, this is where we're going. And if you're ready for more, let's go. And if you're not quite there, that's okay, we gotcha, So it's when I think about pulling cusps and clustering learning outcomes together and selecting ones that have commonalities, the organizing ideas are super helpful and they can direct us in that way. And then we can think about what kind of science would we like to do? Like, let's do science, So then if you could then decide, well, maybe we might look at a descriptive or comparative investigation or something experimental. When I was looking at those two particular ones about landforms and seasonal changes, I really think it's about being descriptive and it's comparing, right? It's like looking that we would pose a question. It doesn't really need to have hypotheses. It's really about collecting, comparing, analyzing, and we can take a look at the verbs that are used in the cusps to really help us know what we're asking students to do. So I started to play with an idea. Yeah, you're going to turn on that great drone footage again, right? I thought, yeah, what if we could? Because doesn't that fit beautifully into those two learner outcomes? So what if we created an investigation or a descriptive or a comparative assessment task or a learning experience that says, if I was a bird and I was thinking about the background knowledge that we could build with this, we could read poetry about geese in the V formation crossing, moving across Alberta. I did find one. I'll have to add it into the notes. And I'm thinking of Barbara Reed's work, the picture books that have, the bird's eye view. There's lots of ways that we could start to create and build that knowledge. And then we could ask the students to be that Canada goose traveling in a V formation across the landscape of Alberta. And get them to ask us, what would you see on your journey? And the criteria for success with this would be to include, show us 3 different landforms and to make sure that we're touching on and assessing their knowledge and their application of the skills and procedures of what happens to the land in different seasons. They would draw and describe 2 different seasons within those landforms. So on the next slide, we created a little bit of what could call a flight tracker. It's just really simple, but if it saves you a little bit of time in your class and you might like to try it, then please steal it. Put this out on big paper so they have lots of space where they could, I'm the bird and I'm going across the foothills. What does that look like? And what season might it be? How would I know it's that season? Where's the evidence of that? And so a really simple um, collector, a thought collector, a flight tracker, if you will, could be used to reveal the evidence of what students have learned about these particular cusps clustered together, and it could land in multiple grades as a reasonable assessment.
I love this tracker idea so much. Like when we look at some of the other learning outcomes, being able to identify landmarks. The drone has some interesting landmarks that some of the learning outcomes could meet too. So as I'm flying over, what part of Alberta am I flying over? Where am I going? We could use, Google Earth to expand it, right? To see the whole flight pattern of geese and migration, again, depending on the grade that you're using to support this work. And if
Yeah.
we wanted to do cross-curricular, we could add that goose analogy to leadership, right? In
Yeah.
physical education and wellness. And so I just can't stop riffing off this piece. There's a lot of opportunities for folks.
I hope that if you're a teacher that's not a grade 1 or 2 teacher, that you can also see how something like this, that clustering happens in any grade, and where possible, or where if you have more than 2 grades, it takes a little bit more time, but that's where AI can help you out a little bit, and you'll be able begin to build those, and it will take time as we come to know and really understand our curriculum more deeply. Here's another analogy, if this helps as well. When we think going across different grades, but you can also go across different subjects to cluster and make things more transdisciplinary. So here is a design task that could work in a grade 5 and 6 context. I've pulled outcomes from grade 6, but there are elements of this task asks students to make a display or performance or exhibit at the Mayor's Expo to talk about the impact of climate change on Earth, specifically in Alberta. So the grade 5 outcomes really look at the impact on climate and understanding and knowing that deeply. And then grade 6 starts to go a little further into climate change. And so a task like this, you can see how you can pull in outcomes and cusps from science and then from ELAL. And on the next slide, I'm using this bouquet analogy, like each flower represents a different subject area. I know I'm a cheese ball
I
sometimes,
love
but
it.
the idea that you could pull in some math in terms of investigating relative frequency using experimental data, and what do we do with all of that? And when we do pull those outcomes together and we design a learning experience that gives them an overarching task, a goal, a target, a critical challenge, there's lots of names for it, a project, that through that process, they're also developing competencies like problem solving, managing information, communication in terms of how are they going to share their learning and how will they respond to questions that come about their research and their opinions. What do you think about climate change? That can really equip them for a future that they are walking right into.
I love it. I love it. And I think as we think about these fantastic ideas that Cheryl's been giving us around, okay, how could we put this together? How could we cluster? How could we move our competencies in together? One of the things that we naturally start to think about is, okay, now what does that look like as I'm moving through the classroom and I wanting to check in on that learning, to check in to say, hey, are we getting it? Do we need more help? Where do we go with that? And when we have a multi-age classroom, we're checking in at different levels. And so we've thought about some ideas that we've tried that might be helpful for you to consider as you're looking for those pieces. And one of our main provocations, of course, comes from Jay McTighe, as he talks about as we're gathering our evidence of what students know and do, we're capturing little pictures that we're putting together in a photo album. And as we've tagged on the slide here, as scientists, we're also gathering evidence because we want to be able to tell the truth about what our students know, understand, and can do. And we can only do that as we build the culture that we talked about in one of our other series in session number 2. And as we've built those assessment feedback loops that we've talked about in 1 and 2. And now we're building on that in this piece. One of the things that we've learned from Fisher and Fry's research is that if we find a universal response mechanism that we can employ in our classroom that becomes part of our procedure and our protocols, we can propel learning forward. And what that looks like is we want to about every 10 minutes do some sort of universal check-in. Now, some of you might be going, whoa, Adley, so you want me to stop my class every 10 minutes and check in? No, I want you to propel learning forward by creating an opportunity every 10 minutes for students to give you the thumbs up, the thumbs down, or I need more help, or I need some way of moving forward. Randolph in 207 talked about in his research, response cards are associated with higher levels of achievements on tests and quizzes and participation. And using these kind of response cards provide a higher level of achievement than students raising their hand, because raising a hand can feel really personal, can feel like you're singling somebody out. And yet a response card, if everybody's giving a response, then the teacher does a quick scan and then thinks about what the course will be moving forward. And students feel like they've got more agency. They also feel more respected in that process. And so this is just one example. I've got a class set of these that I like to use and to bring out and use when I'm working in classrooms. These are double-sided, and so they flash the green when it's yes or true, and they're double-sided, which is really nice when you're sitting in a classroom, so my peers might be able to see that. They're great for classroom discussions. The one with the light bulb says, I have an idea, or I disagree. I'd like to add, the addition is I can add something to what you're talking about. And so, or I'd like more information. And so there's an agency that students can flash the card that they need during that universal response piece. And that every 10 minutes doesn't need to be a whole class discussion. You might go to each group separately. If you're having them work in an inquiry, you may just kind of walk around the room and have kids flash the cards where you're going. But again, once we have kids using those rings, I know that in some of the schools that we've been using them, they are replacing them every 3 months because the kids get really used to using them, and they get really used to having that coach, that regular kind of correspondence, and teachers get used to having that coach, which is exciting.
Yeah, yeah. I have a question for you, Adelie. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
Um, I love these, and we've actually made some for you and stuck them in the resource guide for you. And I've also seen, sorry, what I want to say is that I like the way you said you're circling around the room and you're thinking about checking in consistently and through that routine and repetition. Because if it's not done in conjunction with that relationship that you have with student and the other kinds of check-ins, it or without that growth mindset that we talked about in building the culture, it could be just like, yeah, I'm fine. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. But when you know students well enough, like, have you ever had teachers that are like, yeah, they're not really telling me the truth about what's happening for them? What do you think? Like, how would you respond to a teacher that doesn't really see the value in those universal responses in periodic times?
I love that question because as an educator, we know that students communicate through their behavior.
Mhm.
And so we know that if there's a student who's perpetually fine and we know they're not fine, it means that they're signaling perhaps that they don't feel safe in the classroom to share that piece outwardly. Or maybe there's something else that's going on. And so then it gives us a time to actually do the asadere moment, right? So the assessment, sit beside and go and sit beside that student and have a quick question. I notice you always say you're fine, but I
Yeah.
also notice that you're struggling. How might you be able to tell me that you're struggling so I can give you some extra help and you feel and you in a way that you feel like you'd like to share that with me. And so
Mhm.
maybe they use a different response card. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe they're sharing something. "Oh, when you walk by and I do this, then I want help." Or maybe they need a little bit more time to build that relationship with you. I know in some cases we've said, "Who would you like to get help from?" Well, there's a peer that they feel super comfortable with. And so if they want help, they're going to flash the card not to the teacher, but to the peer. And so these universal response cards, once you've built that growth mindset that you just reminded us of, Cheryl, we can be using these in all kinds of different ways. Peer to peer, teacher to student, all kind, different adults who come in and out of our classroom to support us. So it becomes a true universal response in that I can universally share what I need in a way that helps me feel safe to do that because in perhaps I'm in a classroom with my siblings and my cousins and I
Yeah.
don't feel super safe saying I don't know something because I don't know, I don't want to be made fun of, I don't want all of those things. Yes, there's a culture piece to attend to, but we can also continue to do universal check-ins while the rest of that culture and relationship piece is being built.
Yeah, I can imagine them even just flipping it over and laying it on their desk with like, I have a question, and you're circling around. So it doesn't have to be like a stand up and look at me kind of moment. It could be much more subtle and mixed in. Thank you for that thoughtful response. I hope that's useful to teachers too. Mhm.
Yeah, let's go to this next piece. Cheryl, do you want to talk about the
Yeah.
who needs what?
Thanks, thanks. Yeah, who needs what? This is what this one's called. It's very straightforward. Um, Even though it has like these little images and this pretty chart, it's not meant to be a polished make work document. This is for those moments where you're doing those universal response and you're circling around and you're checking in, or you've done an exit ticket and or you have gathered some sort of formative data, show me what you know, any of those pieces. And quickly in your mind, you need to kind of sort out where your students are so that you can plan forward and you can use that information to be responsive and thinking about what's next. So the top section in the yellow is really like, what is it we're working on? Maybe it's those landforms, or maybe it's the looking at knowledge and skills and procedures around climate and the understandings. But you're thinking about different ways that you have supported with resources. This is like a pencil scratch, along these pieces and really just trying to show what it is where you're going. It can be incomplete. It can be on the run. It can be sitting on the side of your desk as you're walking by. You're just like, okay. And then when you go down into the green questions or the green columns, rows. Yeah, we think about students' names or groups. You can use initials to quickly say, Adelie and Cheryl need a little more time on this one to process and use feedback. And tomorrow we're going to, I remember that great video. I want to bring them back to that one and set up some questions for them. So then tomorrow in a small group, we're going to be doing this. And then I noticed that Kim and Wanda have a new angle and they're ready to move on to the next thing because they are like climate masters. And so I put their initials down in there and then I set up a small group or a station rotation for them. And it's not necessarily things that are just specifically for them, but maybe it's at that readiness that not all the students have to be doing the same thing at the same time. So on the next slide, you'll notice that I've just kind of filled it in to show how different pieces are fitting into the box. It's meant to be, partial thoughts and ideas, some connections. There's some student initials and some suggestions for what kind of resources might help them as they move along forward. So I hope that you'll find this a useful tool. Make it better and send it back to us. That would be even better. So thanks. Mhm.
I love that. I love that idea of just walking around the classroom and being able to quickly note something on an iPad or something as we walk around.
Mhm, mhm.
As we were thinking about, okay, we're going to combine the cusps, we're going to do some universal check-ins, see how folks are doing. One of the things that we've really started to lean into is the single point rubric. Some of our rubrics become quite big, and they have a lot of different, they become quite text dense. And so
Oh, did you ever hear about the acronym TLDR?
no.
Too long, didn't read.
Yes. Oh yes, 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 I did. Sorry. Yeah, yeah.
I think there's rubrics out there that are TLDR.
Yes. They also, some of our students don't choose to go for the top end of the rubric. They're like,
Mhm.
what'll get me the pass? And so when we move into a single point or a 1 point rubric, what we're looking here, and we've stolen this wonderful quote from Dylan Williams, is that students take more time for their learning and more responsibility. And so they really start to think about, okay, what are the real targets that I want to match? And am I meeting those pieces or am I not meeting those pieces? And where do I need to go next? And sometimes those conversations around what do I need to still learn and where do I go next are not, they're not something that a student naturally comes to us with. They have to be taught those skills to analyze. Some of us needed to be taught around, okay, well, what do I know? What do I not know? Where do I need to go next? And of course, that's capsulated in agency. And Cheryl's put together this a great graphic with this beautiful backpack that kind of looks at all of the pieces here that we're looking at, that will, the ability, the choice, the ownership that we want to be moving on to with our students. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you a couple different kinds of 1 point rubrics. And some of you may look at it and go, well, that's not really a rubric. That's a guide for something. However, a single point rubric identifies what we need to do, and then the student needs to do it and reflect on it. So here is a great example of a science investigation. Our students may not come to us knowing what are all the parts of a science investigation that they need to do. However, they know that now they know what they need to do, and they can go ahead and fill that in for us so that we can really see what they understand about an investigation as we go through. You might use that as a formative loop to come back, provide some feedback, and perhaps they move forward.
Might be a good place to also have some exemplars up in the class that you co-create with students to say, when we're looking at pulling our observations together, what do you believe good quality observations look like? And having those examples visible so that they can line their stuff up according to, beside one of those targets to say, oh yeah, I think I need more detail, or I didn't use numbers and words and pictures, something like that.
I love it. Any kind of those anchor charts, I
Mhm.
think are helpful. If you've been in a session with Cheryl or me before, you will know that we love to talk about Katie White. We love to present some pieces from some solution tree. And these are some, again, they on the offset, they may appear just to be student assessment, but we do have rubrics for student assessment. And this is a single point rubric in that we're getting folks to reach for mastery. We're getting folks to meet for proficiency for that other end of the rubric. We're not giving them any opportunities to miss some pieces. And so on this tracking the process, anything that a student needs to track their process is on the worksheet, is on this self-reflective tool. So as they're going ahead and filling it in for you, and again, Cheryl's talk about let's have some exemplars, let's do some pieces, add to this, but it gives you a really good idea and students great opportunities to practice how am I going with this particular topic? Where am I going? Here's a daily decision-making chart for some of your students who are not sure how to move through the day, who are not sure how to continue to move forward. This is a great way to help folks make learning goals and keep their learning goals. This I, I'm gonna get Cheryl to come in and chat about this in a minute, but I just love everything about this nature journaling piece. And as you read around the picture, there is such a clear rubric defining what are all the parts that we need, as well as with an exemplar of what it might look like for that particular kiddo as they start to journal. And this is a very big passion of Cheryl's too. So Cheryl, I just want you to talk about this one and talk to us about why journaling could be really important in our work, but also how this might help us learn more what students know, understand, and can do.
Not just in science, it's in everything, but like a science journal where we really are capturing, this is a nature example, but it can be anywhere, right? It's like icons and representations, and whether it's symbols to show different parts of pictures, observations that include ideas and thinking and questions and with a question mark to, or indications that might not be, really mastery if it's but it's a beginning, not to really posing valuable questions, but thinking about the structure and the layout and teaching students the scientific skills to capture and use their observations and put them in and to document them. That documentation can be really useful. I also think that whether or not you decide to respond or to use sticky notes into students' nature journals or science journals as a place. I used to have a class where we called them everything journals because it wasn't just for art or drawing or writing, it was for everything. And so the idea that you could use this data as triangulation and part of the full photo album of evidence that you use to to really determine if a student has achieved a learner outcome is made possible through this, while also making a strong connection and building that relationship with the land or outside or the content as much as possible. This particular, we've added a link in. This image comes from John Muir Law's book, How to Teach Nature Journaling. There's a free download, which is full of tricks and tips for teachers to really make this happen. So check out the resource guide, and we hope you'll love it. I'm sorry though, it's going to cause you to want to buy the book, so it's going to cost a little bit of money there. It's really a fan favorite, and I know that maybe you'll even have heard of it before. That's great.
And I think, the other piece about journaling, and I've used sketchnoting and journaling to help students to be able to put together their evidence and to be able to connect those ideas. And I think when we look at the multi-age classroom and we're having folks journal and look at things and notice things in that way, we're going to see some of those summations that are really helpful for students to look at. Okay, now I've seen this evidence. What do I do with it, and what sense can I make from it? So I think it's really exciting when we look at the single point rubric. This is an example from Michelle Gill around presentations and video recordings that we could use anywhere. They become a little bit like the anchor charts that Cheryl was talking about earlier on the wall. The idea of a single point rubric is that they are a rubric that can be used in multiple different ways. So in this case, every time my students are creating a presentation or giving a presentation or submitting a video recording, this is the rubric we're going to use. And so what you see in the criteria is the criteria that you're wanting or that you have decided is going to be the place that you want students to target and to get to. And then what you see in areas to grow, once the student has done the presentation, they fill out the rubric first. And so they're going to look through the different criteria paces and they're going to go say, do I need some work here? Did I meet this? Or is this something that I feel that glowed? And then they're going to give the evidence of why they feel they met that particular criteria. And once they filled it in, then you come behind and respond and suggest what you noticed. here's an example for a scientific investigation. So we've got some pieces here that we could use every time. And some of the language may feel a little bit precise. And Cheryl and I talked back and forth about, well, could we use this from K to 12? Could we not? When we went back into the curriculum and we went back into the program of studies and we looked at the language that's being used from kindergarten to grade 12, the precision in the language and those verbs and nouns are taken right out of the curriculum and are expected from grade 1 and up. And so it's do all of our students understand those words quite yet? No, you may help them understand that, but they're going to need to be able to show proficiency in those learning outcomes. And so I just wanted to show you an example of what it looks like in place. And again, this is something that we put together and I use in a classroom with a teacher. The template comes from the Teacher Clarity Playbook, and it was what you see here at the top. So I'm just using the work that Cheryl's talked about from the beginning, using the cusp. You could add your learning intentions directly from the work that you have put together, those cusps, and then think about where do I want what kind of an activity. So if we use the flight pattern, if we use the geese as our example here, our success criteria would be the big things that we would want students to perhaps have demonstrated through that flight pattern, depending on their grade. They may, as Cheryl talked about in her example, the seasons. So how did they notice what season was there? What was the experience of the geese flying? Some of those big rocks that were part of that project or that investigation would be in that column. And then in this case, the student reflection, it's kind of faded. And so I just put it here. So you'll see that the students, as they reflected, they circled the criteria and then added some comments. So in this case, he said, I didn't connect. So that it says connect and model labels, vocabulary, answer together. So they're all saying the same thing. So when he said, I haven't connected my responses, they aren't saying the same thing. And then he said, I need to add, I have shown by. So I need to demonstrate how I'm going to be connecting all of these pieces. Then what you see is the teacher added her piece to this particular, to his comment that says, I agree. I agree that is an area that we're going to work on for next time. And then you'll see there's some other pieces here that they went back and forth with. And then in the bottom, my next step is, and he said, to connect my information together. And the teacher asked the question, what is going to help you to do this? And so even though there's a reflection and a single point rubric going on, this is a conversation that next time we're going to connect this, but how can I help you? Or how can you help yourself? Or what is going to help you to make those connections the next time we're putting our investigations together? And so I just
conversation, right? Back and forth. It's an interaction. I love it. Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Were you finished what you wanted to say? I'm sorry.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, that conversation, and it makes me also think about, as a teacher, when students are engaged in the learning, or maybe they're active in recording observations in their journal, or they are conducting an experiment, or their hands they're on, or they're talking about something that they've already learned. Sometimes a look for tool can be a really useful way of streamlining assessment in a classroom, a busy classroom with lots of things happening. Here's an example of a look for document that it was inspired by the work of Damien Cooper in his Rebooting Assessment, a masterful book that is quite outstanding. In that example, it gives you a couple of different sections. There's a few things going on here. There's some teacher talk prompts, because classrooms have lots of things going on, and there's lots of distractions and things that can possibly, I know we're quite amazing, but it's possible that our distractions take us away from what it is we're looking for in student work. And so by pre-planning and deciding on some of the prompts that you might ask students or things that you want to look for specifically. It might be, evidence of something in their writing, or you're waiting to hear for um, a concise consolidation of multiple pieces pulling together that shows a connection and a relationship and how they make sense. And so giving yourself some tips, like what is it that you really want to remember to look for and think about? And maybe it's where you have to nudge kids a little further to say, help me understand what you're thinking there, because I want to hear it in a different way. Or can you give me some clarity around what you mean about putting your ideas together, as in, that last example. In the center, you can level different qualities of learning evidence if you want to, or it can just be like a yes, not quite yet indicator. It doesn't have to always be put onto the levels of achievement on a rubric, but certainly that progression toward mastery can be helpful as well. You can put student initials in different categories as you're working through, walking around, checking on their progress, or you can also just describe. I believe Adelie was at this proficiency level because here's the evidence. She showed this and this, and so some teachers use these thought collectors, one per student, and sometimes it's a master document where they're capturing that anecdotal observations and listening for quotes and trying to catch things in the moment. You can grab your own copy of this. We've provided it for you in the resource guide. And again, there's lots of ways that you can tweak and modify it to suit your grades, multiple grades, and your needs according to what your students are doing. Do you want to talk about this one?
Sure, this is just a riff on what Cheryl was chatting about, just another way to do it. It's also another way to have students reflect on their work as they're going through. And again, this one is adapted from Jennifer Gonzalez from Cult of Pedagogy. She's got a lot of work on a single point rubric. She had her first one, then she came back in 2017 to include this piece that again you could look for the 1, 2, 3, 4s, and you can use this exactly in the same way that Cheryl's just talked about, going around with the initials and deciding where you want to put your students, giving them a rationale. You could also have students as an exit slip fill this out. And so they would provide what they feel is the rationale for the learning outcomes that you've been working on or that you were working on for the day. And then it gives you a chance to come back and respond to that student in the same way as that other single point rubric. Just another way of doing the exact same thing.
I hope that these ideas will provide your teams with a couple of different tricks or ideas, maybe modifications of how you've seen them before. Maybe it's just reminded you of something you already knew, and we get busy, our brains get full. So hopefully you will find some use in the tools and ideas that we've presented today. Thank you, Adelie and Jess, for your support in putting these together.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you to everyone who came and participated in our sessions. And as Cheryl mentioned from the top, we would please reach out. Let us know if we could make these better. Let us know if you're like, hey, could we do a deep dive? Because one of the things that as we were creating this, we all struggled with the fact that we were doing some, higher level conversations. And there's a lot of these places that we could go a little bit deeper with you. So we would look forward to that place too. And as always, Cheryl, I'm so grateful to work with you, and I'm so grateful we had Jess as our partner. And
likewise, thank you. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.